Ladies and gentlemen, we are starting in 2 minutes. Please take your seats or we'll fly off without you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start. Please take your seats. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to an event that hasn't happened for 2 years in a row. So I'm Edward. I am the president of the King's College Alumni Society Singapore for 2020 and 2021. COVID started shortly after this committee were elected, and since almost nothing could happen in terms of events in 2020, we all stayed on for another term. By way of an introduction, I read classics for my undergrad and Byzantine studies for my MA. With all the high drama of world events of the last 2 years and the tense thriller that is the world situation right now, I suppose here I am comic relief. I had a wonderful time at King's. I'm sure the rest of you did as well. My favorite activity was attending lectures of courses I did not take for credit, just for interest's sake. Some of you may not be aware, but in Singapore, one must ballot for places to register for a course, and there is no possibility of attending a lecture just for fun. In my department, the classics department, lecturers in such things as Greek and Roman history and literature tend to be overjoyed and somewhat bewildered when someone is actually interested. And their joy was infectious. So it is that even now, even though my day job has very little to do with the Greco-Roman world that I studied, I maintained links with the academic field and with the classics department at King's. Earlier I said we could do practically nothing during COVID, but we did try to keep morale up. We did have one event. We had a Zoom talk by a volcanologist at the local volcano institute entitled "Lava Makes the World Go Round." We had a pretty good turnout because during COVID, everyone was bored at home. So what does the Alumni Society Singapore do? In past years, we've had a Dine and Discourse series where we visit interesting food places to eat and learn about the history and culture behind the cuisine, essentially eat and chat. We have organized heritage walks to learn more about historic neighborhoods of Singapore. And we have a tradition of an annual dual day dinner, which was suspended in 2020 and which we plan to revive next year. Of course, you will all remember that dual day is sort of King's Founders Day. At present, we have about 200 names on our mailing list, give or take, of alumni, and I'm certain many of you here tonight are not actually on the list. So if you'd like to be on it, and why would you not, speak to any of the Alumni Society committee members. You spot us because we're wearing special ribbons like prize-winning pumpkins at country fairs, and we'll keep you informed. So I now pass the microphone to Professor Kapur, whom you've all been waiting for. Thank you.
I like the music. They're probably expecting me to dance, but I fear I'll disappoint you. Well, the first thing I have to say is thank you very much, Edward, for convening, and to the committee that does such a wonderful job. I was told by my colleagues, this of course is my first visit here in my capacity as president, that there is a very special vibe to the alumni community in Singapore. And they talked about these events that you organize. So I really wanted to be here in person to see it. And I can tell you, there is something special just in the density and the cohesion in which you come together. And I think it's in great part to what the committee does. I'm also mindful that when we usually visit this part of the world, we also visit your neighbors in Hong Kong. Unfortunately, this time, for reasons you can well understand, it's a bit difficult for us to get there. But they've decided to, in some sense, snoop into your visit over here. So I trust Bertie Leung and his colleagues in Hong Kong are able to see us. So a wave out and a shout out to you, and I hope you're all doing well. What I thought, rather than telling you about myself, is actually welcome you to King's. So in the little time that I will take, I thought I might take you down memory lane at King's. And I think this is Reggie, as many of you would know, and this is the original incarnation of Reggie. How many of you have actually seen this? Okay, good. At least some of you have. Well, it seems that those who are a bit of the older lot have actually seen this. Well, this Reggie is still very much there. It might have moved around over time because the LSC friends used to try and steal Reggie. So it has had to move around. But if you go, this latest incarnation is actually in the foyer of the King's building. And it's on the mezzanine between the ground floor and the first floor. And I wanted to go back to Reggie to really bring back the spirit of King's and to share with you a little bit of how King's is. But I noted with great pleasure that not only do we have very recent graduates, I think I saw Mr. Zaman, who was in the audience somewhere, who was a 1979 graduate. Am I right, Paul? There you are. Now, can anyone beat that? I'm just looking for a show of hands somewhere. No. Well, what a distinction that is. And we're so pleased, Paul, to have you here with us. But it was wonderful looking down that list of alumni, that it goes all the way from 1979 to just last year. So thank you very much for all of you who are coming here. Now, what is happening at King's? I think the first thing is for you to know with assurance that we continue to be an international university in the heart of London. Now, of course, all of you were drawn to King's because it was an international university. You make it an international university. But just to tell you, it has grown. Now, when COVID started 2 years ago, just as I was telling you, we didn't know which way it was going to turn out. For a moment, we thought that the number of international students at King's might plummet. But we are surprised, as is everyone else, that we have more international students at King's now than we've ever had before. And this year, we've had more international students at King's on campus than we've ever had before. There are now 16,500 international students from nearly 200 countries who call King's their home at all levels, at undergraduate, at postgraduate, at PhD level. So we are indeed very much an international university for this world. But this part of the world remains particularly important to us. You are particularly well represented. At any point in time, there are close to about 2,500 to 3,000 students from Singapore, Malaysia, and Hong Kong who actually call King's their home. And there has been a great attraction to always the traditional disciplines of law and engineering and related sciences, but more recently to arts and humanities, social science, and public policy, and even more recently to our wonderful business school, about which I will say in a moment. But it's not just a one-way street. It's not only that you as students come there, we're actually very proud of our links with institutions right here in Singapore. So we have great relationships with the NUS. At any point in time, we may have between 25 and 30 PhD students who are involved in joint PhD projects across the NUS. We have good relationships with the NTU on a number of projects, and increasingly now with the Singapore Management University. But not only that, with the encouragement of both our governments, there is now a UK-Singapore Entrepreneurship and Innovation Alliance, which has 11 British universities as a partner to it, and 5 Singaporean universities, all 5 Singaporean universities, and King's is very much there. So I hope you get the assurance that you are very much central and your region is very much central to King's. But what has always been at the heart of our effort is to enable student success. And in the short time that I've had to speak to many of you, it is really heartening to see how far and wide a King's education has brought you. You studied many different things, and 10, 15, 20 years later, you're putting it to use in many interesting and innovative ways. So that remains to us a very important part of what we do at King's. And of course, you sign up for a discipline, you get a degree. That's just one part. What we're trying to see is how can we add to that. Now, I'm going to tell you a few things we're doing lately in the last year or two. So many of you who were undergraduates or postgraduates before that might not have actually benefited from it, but at least it gives you a sense of how King's is changing with the times. So one great request from the students were that they come to this big university. There are so many facilities, so many student societies. How do we make the best use of it? So we've now started a new course, which is available to all undergraduates, and it's taken beyond your discipline. So if you're doing geography, you don't sit with geographers. If you're doing geography, you'll sit with a medical student and a history student, and it'll be called the King's First Year. And what that focuses on is on things like cultural competence, because when you're an international university, You're out there with people from different cultures. What that focuses on is on disruptive thinking. And then finally, what it focuses on is how do you organize in a community? Because we want our students, as they start their King's journey, to be aware of the world around them and how to make change in it. And in the second year, we're able to offer them opportunities of either leadership in our Civic Leadership Academy or entrepreneurship at the King's Entrepreneurship Institute. And we're growing these number of opportunities. And in fact, several of our entrepreneurs have actually gone and now launched startup companies in the UK. And then, of course, as it comes to the final year, we connect you to our wonderful online community. Now, I know many of you are a part of this community. Many of you offer your services as mentoring through this community. And I can tell you that for our students, this is especially valuable. And there is a particular bond between students from this region because they actually want to connect with alumni from this region. Now, along this journey, the one thing that King's did not have in its wonderful faculties was a dedicated business school. So one of our innovations in the last few years is the start of a King's Business School. And I'm so pleased. Now, this is Bush House. If you're wondering exactly where is this picture taken from, if you come down that straight road called Kingsway that comes down to Aldwych, and you look, that's Bush House. That's where BBC used to be. But now it's a King's building. And we're very fortunate that today we have amongst us the founding dean of the King's Business School, Professor Stephen Bach. So I'll turn to you, Stephen, to say a few words. You'll say it much better than I will about the King's Business School. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Principal. And yes, this is our new home for King's Business School, and we moved in there in 2017. And it's an amazing building. We have a trading floor in there. We have a vegan cafe in there. So we have, all the really important things that need to be in there. So it's really great to be here because after a couple of years of enforced staying at home, it's lovely to be back on the road and meeting our alumni. Really enjoyed meeting some of you also over lunch today, talking about some of the challenges that we're facing in terms of sustainability. This is also a very special month for the business school because we actually turned 5. So in November, this is our 5th birthday, our anniversary. And it was great because I don't often get invited to many 5th birthday parties anymore. Let me just say a little bit about the business school and what we're seeking to do. So we were established in 2017. And as many of you will know, there are thousands of business schools around the world. So we very much wanted to differentiate ourselves. And where did we start? We started with the DNA of what King's is and what the King's community is. And one of the things that we're incredibly proud of, and which the principal will talk about more, is the fact that we work with so many of the other faculties, both in our education and in our research. And I think that's something that, not many other universities are able to do in quite the same way as we are able to do. And of course, the service ethos is so strong to King's. And again, the people that we have, our students and the staff within the business school, are very much about, making a difference. The research they do is sort of actionable research to move from sort of advocacy to actually solutions for the world. So our ambition has to be a globally recognized and innovative school that reaches new audiences and creates positive social impact. So how have we got on? It's been a very busy 5 years. There are things that it's important for business schools to do, some of which is to get accreditations from both the American accreditation body and the European accreditation body. And I'm pleased to say that we've been able to do that over the last couple of years. And we're seeking one more accreditation this year. And we've grown the faculty and our students. So we have about half and half undergraduates and postgraduates. And we've grown from about 2,000 to about 3,500 students. But crucially, always seeking to elevate quality and enriching the experience that we give our students. And that's why it's great to have you in the room tonight, because talking to so many of you, your experience in industry, as regulators, as journalists, and in other areas, you know, it'd be great for you to sort of connect more with the business school and mentor and do other things for our students. So I think all these things that I've talked about point in the same direction, very much a focus on societal impact. For example, enabling our undergraduates to act as strategy consultants to small businesses in London. But I think what really unites our plans as a business school and as a university is that we believe that responsible and sustainable business needs to be at the core of everything that we do. And an important part of this will be a new Institute for Sustainable Business as part of King's commitment to sustainability and seeking to reverse climate change. And no one is saying that's easy. We talked a lot earlier about greenwashing and some of the challenges we face. But I think as universities, we're not there to do the easy things. We're there to do the hard things. So thank you very much for coming tonight. Please keep in touch as alumni, and I hope to speak to many of you later on in the evening.
And can I really thank our Dean, Stephen Bach, because he's really been the founding dean, and you can see it's a spirit that is actually infusing the business school. So not only have we changed the business school, I was pleased to see many graduates here of our engineering programs going back many, many years. Now, there was a time when we offered many different kinds of engineering, but now we had to recognize that offering engineering in the center of London is actually a difficult task because you need space for big labs. So this is what we've done. We've re-engineered our engineering at King's. And if you remember the quad, that was the space between the King's building and Somerset House. We've dug down 4 floors to create this new engineering space where 800 students will be doing what we call a general engineering degree with a master's specialization to be offered thereafter. So we are continuing the engineering. Many of you asked me what's happening to engineering at King's. It's alive and well, and it's right at the center of King's, right at the Strand. But I think, as Stephen said, it has always been a King's ideal to use its knowledge to make a difference in the world. So in addition to providing very good education, in addition to opening new areas of education, where are we going with that? Now, I could tell you about hundreds of stories, but I'll only tell you 4 quick areas where we're working. King's has always had a very strong relationship with the health and health sciences. In fact, one of the oldest hospitals in London is the St. Thomas's Hospital. It truly is back to the time of St. Thomas. So it is about 900 years old. And it is a King's-related hospital. It is a part of the King's Health Partners. And with them, we're working on how to push surgical engineering. And at the same time, we have a long relationship with the first mental hospital, which was called the Royal Bethlehem Hospital in London. In fact, it is so old that the English word Bedlam, you know the word Bedlam, actually comes from the Royal Bethlehem Hospital, because people used to refer to that hospital as Bethlehem, and they always thought that that was about craziness. So we're moving forward these hundreds of years of association with what is now going to be Europe's largest center for children and young people's mental health. So I've been speaking to colleagues here in Singapore, and they tell that even Singapore is becoming increasingly concerned about what we're doing for mental health for young people. This is obviously a concern for us in London, and we want to continue that hundreds of years old tradition by creating what will be Europe's largest center. It'll bring together over 100 psychologists, psychiatrists, neuroscientists, brain imagers with one focus, which is child and youth mental health. And on our other side, which is the St. Thomas's Hospital, we're building the London Institute for Healthcare Engineering. And this is the institute which will help surgeons by using imaging and robotics in a way to produce the next generation surgery. So I hope you get a sense that not only are we teaching medicine and nursing and dentistry as we do, we're actually pushing the boundaries of mental health and physical health as we do it. Stephen's already talked about climate action and sustainability. We think we have a very important role to play here because, as you know, we would know, King's sits right between Whitehall, which is the center for government policy, and the city, which is the center for business. And I think with our King's Business School, as well as our Department of Social Science and Public Policy, we really have an opportunity to bring together the social science, public policy on this matter, and we will. And the last area for focus for us is the digital futures. I think everyone is convinced in some sense that AI will change our lives, but we don't know exactly how that will do it. And increasingly, as it becomes a ubiquitous part of our lives, not only does it raise technical questions, it raises very interesting ethical questions. What is the ethical and safe use of AI in our societies? So this is just to give you a sense of the new areas in which King's today is going to be pioneering as it has in the past. But we're not only trying to change science, we're also trying to change the way King's actually is and works for our students. So these are some of the new student spaces. Now, this came to us as the Bush House came to us in 2017. So I fear many of you actually may not have had the opportunity to enjoy it. But I thought I should show you this anyway to see what some of our newer students are able to see. But I think a picture all of you would probably know is this. If you've been on the Strand campus, you will know that there was a stranded church in the middle of the Strand. And then there were 4 lanes of traffic running with all sorts of double-deckers and taxis. And if you ever had to cross, you had to take your life in your hands, say your prayers, and hope you make it. Because there were actually no zebra crossings in the middle. You had to either go to one end of the road or the other end of the road, and most of us didn't do it. You know, London, not Singapore, so people jaywalked. So, well, what would absolutely amaze you, that this traffic has been stopped. There is no traffic on the Strand anymore. So for 700 years, Strand connected the city to Westminster. And today, I'm just going to give you an aerial shot. So there you are looking at it from the top. You can see the church in the middle, and you can see people walking on both sides. That's the way it looks now. In fact, it did not look like this even last summer. The change is happening right now. So a real treat for all of you who have known the Strand campus or have studied at the Strand campus is to come and see the new Strand campus, because to the left, you're seeing the Bush House buildings. That's where the business school is. That's where the School of Computing and Information Sciences is. That's where social science and public policy is. And to the right, you're seeing the Strand building and the classic King's building. So in some sense, we always talked about it as the Strand building. Now, finally, we have a Strand campus around this pedestrianized place in London. And of course, this is the core that many of you may know. Now, again, some of you would be surprised because it used to be black tarmac and cars used to be parked. But actually now students walk on this space as we go around. So I hope it gives you a sense that the Kings that you loved and Reggie is still there. We are trying to evolve our education. We are trying to introduce new areas like the King's Business School. We have changed our engineering for the modern times. We are pushing in areas of health where we can be world leaders, and we are sensitive to the changes that are taking place in society. And at all the time, we're continuing to improve things that is it. But it is all in our effort to have impact and reach. And our biggest impact is you, our graduates. So no matter how much research a university does, its biggest impact on the world are the graduates who go to change the world. And we'll soon be hearing from one who's done exactly that. But our other impact is the way you give to your local community. So of course you come together to be with us in London for a few years, but we are really pleased that when we have our global day of service, local communities of kings all around the world come together to contribute to where they are now. So it is that spirit that I would like to applaud. So I hope you've gotten a little bit of a sense, the kings you knew, the kings that is, and the kings that will be. And this is, of course, my cue now to turn the second part of this evening talk. And I'm pleased to introduce alumnus Cynthia Salim. Cynthia is an Indonesian-American, now a Singaporean, who's an entrepreneur, an investor, and an advisor. Now, Cynthia attended King's on a Rotary Club scholarship, completing a master's in human values and contemporary global ethics in 2011. She's a frequent thought leader on areas of entrepreneurship, social justice, and women's leadership, and she will be here with us today in conversation with Alicia Yoon. Now, Alicia is a graduate from King's with a degree in psychology in 2017, and she's now an organizational psychologist and a client success lead in a new company called Intellect, and she works with HR professionals across Asia Pacific to support things like employee well-being. So I don't think we could have brought together a better pair of alumni to speak about. So Alicia and Cynthia, a very warm welcome on behalf of all of us.
All right. Thank you, Principal Kapur and Stephen, for the very warm welcome and the update. I mean, the developments at King's is always increasing the value of our degree. So thank you for continuing to lift that piece of paper. It's a tough investment environment right now. So at least that one's on the up and up.
Yeah, and it's lovely to hear that, King's is expanding not just on the engineering space, the business space, but I think mental health as well. And I think all of us in Singapore, we know that in Asia, it's always been a taboo. It's always been something that's hidden behind the shadows. But I think, with COVID and what's been happening the last 2 years, it's really spotlighted the whole conversation on mental health. And yeah, I'd really love to hear, your experience as well, Cynthia. I don't know, how has the pandemic been for you? I think the last 2 years, let's start with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of similarities in the generation that graduated now and the way we graduated, right? I graduated in 2009 from undergrad in the midst of the global financial crisis. And we were just talking about what we want to talk about today. And anytime you read somebody's profile, it sounds so clean, right? I'm an entrepreneur and intrapreneur. The last 4 organizations I've been with has had this clean thread, but it's been really rocky, right? It's been tough for millennials. Maybe we could talk about a bit about what's happened after King's, right? So after King's, I went and had my dream job. I went to Geneva, Switzerland, worked in public policy, human rights, particularly migrant rights, working on the policies that have trickled down now to policies like having 1 day off per week mandatory for migrant workers here in Singapore. I was doing that 10 years ago as an intern, right? But it was this, young person shocker to me to find that I found it really hard to sit in an office and write policy all day, right? And it was this catastrophic moment of, oh my God, everything I've ever dreamed of, and now I don't like it. And I feel guilty as well because, we talked about culture of service, right? I grew up in this culture of service and wanting to make an impact. Since then, I've had like 3 industry shifts, right? Again, in some of my older profiles, it'll say, started at McKinsey & Company. Again, when I made that leap, it was a huge challenging leap to have a liberal arts degree and try to make that jump. And even then had another huge challenge, right? My visa expired. So I went to New York. And again, the story is, oh, but she was so passionate about this company she wanted to start. She flew to New York and did it. No, it was super catastrophic, right? Like, this is the best job you could ever get at 23. And now your visa won't renew, right? So there I was in New York, 2011, and the economy hadn't recovered, right? I was like, I thought GFC was over. I went and did a master's. We stalled. We're not good now, right? Tons of interviews. I asked Alicia how she got her job, and she said, there was no job posting, right? One of your mentors said they were an advisor to this startup, and you reached out, there's no careers page. That's how she got her job, right?
Yeah.
Same, right? 7 months of hustling in New York City. And I got my first real long-term job which is one of the most interesting ones to this day. I ran a pick, pack, and ship fulfillment warehouse. And my job was to be the entrepreneur in this company and figured out how to grow the workforce from 12 to over 400 in 6 weeks and drop them off in a controlled manner at the end because we sold Christmas gifts. And when I came in, they said, our HR can't handle this because they're used to hiring one marketing headcount at a time, and we're literally losing people, and people can't get their schedules, and they're losing a week of income that they really need. And we don't have the staffing to pack these Christmas gifts to get it out on time, and we make all of our profit in this 10-week period. So I had this incredible privilege of being with this New York e-commerce company, which looking back is like super on trend, right? Like building out technology with an in-house tech team, building out a fresh team of 8 that worked around the clock, 24 hours, to build this process essentially in this startup. From there, I started Citizen Smart, which was the company that I wanted to start ever since I got that job at McKinsey, which was luxury ethical workwear for women. And again, when people talk to me about it now, oh, you're in venture capital, you were an entrepreneur in New York, you were in the Forbes under 30 list. But again, very messy experience, right? I think we want to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship as well, right? Especially given our business school launch and the fact that entrepreneurship and venture capital has just been taken up a lot of mind space now, right? When I started my company, I grew up in Indonesian family businesses. I wanted to build a small business that could be profitable and I could be proud of. And in that era in New York, and I think now here and other markets where venture capital is developing, there was so much mind share taken up on venture capital. And I managed to resist that and say, I understand what this model is, and this is not the type of business I want to build. And now that I'm on the other side of the table in venture capital, that's also something that we talk about a lot with folks who are still trying to think about what entrepreneurship could look like for them, right? To run a venture-backed company is entirely different from running a family business or a small medium enterprise, right? And I think there's a lot of attention that we need to give to these different types of businesses. So from there, I ended up here in Singapore, where I then led Straits Clan. Is anyone familiar with Straits Clan? It's like the Soho House of Asia. It was a private members club where our goal was to build this sense of community where people could cross-pollinate across industries and make a positive impact. And it's also a lifestyle space. And that again ended up being this timely experience because it was a members club and a pandemic hit, right? And I was brought on at around month 8. At this point, I had been an intrapreneur at the warehouse, an entrepreneur, and then I told myself I wanted to be in this 1 to 5 company where there's some foundations, but I can build it at a pretty rapid speed. So I came when I was around 8 months old. The task was to be the commercial leader and turn it around. And when the pandemic hit, we started looking for a buyer. And some brave souls from a regional real estate company moved to purchase. And I got to experience front of the line, pure merger and acquisition experience, which is like, if anyone's ever done this in real life, it is unbelievable, right? The business school, I'm sure there's like an M&A practice, but to hand over an entire business and an entire team to a new buyer is this wild and challenging experience. And then from there, I'm here now as a venture capital investor, but again, in between that, I took a year off to be a mom, which again, as a working woman and a millennial, is super challenging. I think if we'd been mandated that there's always 1-year maternity leave, that's what we would do, right? But we were told 4 months. And so that's also a life and career decision that has to be made within your family and within yourself to say, this is important to me. So I'm going to take this pause and trust that the labor market's still going to be there for me when I step out. So now I've joined Target Global. It's a large venture capital firm based in London, back home to the mothership. We're $3 billion under management. We've invested in 140 companies, very wide range in technology, everything from Delivery Hero, which is a parent company of Food Panda, you would know, to some impact companies as well, like in alternative proteins. in that space. So it's been quite a riveting journey since.
Wow, that's amazing. Like, I'm just trying to process all
I'm
of that.
tired already too. I know.
Yeah, we just met, so I'm also hearing this for the first time, and I think it's amazing that you started with your degree in human values, and it's transitioned to different areas from McKinsey to then at Straits Clan itself more commercial, and then M&A, which is a little bit like law, I guess, and then now to really in the venture capital space. So yeah, maybe tell me a little bit more on like how did you cope, or how did you go about making these big life decisions? Because I think most people, for myself, I always thought, okay, if I study psychologist, I'm going to be a clinical psychologist, and that's going to be my path, right? So yeah, any piece of advice you would give for new graduates that maybe are kind of still exploring, I don't really know what to do with my degree. Like, yeah, what kind of advice would you give?
Yeah, we spoke about this earlier as well, right, on mental health, because Alicia works for a company that provides mental health support for employees of large companies. And we talked about the stigma of looking for help, right? I've always had a coach, right? When I was 25, I got a coach in New York City who, she herself was entrepreneurial, and she said, I want to become a coach for millennial women entrepreneurs. So you're going to be one of my first free clients, and we're going to do this together. And I remember I had a coaching session with her in my apartment, and my friend was staying over. She's come from London. And when I walked out the door, she said, wow, that was a very American rah-rah kind of chat, right? And I told her, like, well, yeah, I look for people who are going to help me and guide me. Since then, I've had 2 other coaches, right? So I think leveraging those mentoring relationships and looking out for formal help is really important. It's taking your life and career seriously. Those resources are out there.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I think coaching for me has been quite recent as well, since I joined Intellect. And something that I've learned is that coaches don't give you the answers. They believe that the answers lie within you, and they ask and they prompt the questions to help you come to those. So I think definitely, I think you've grown in yourself awareness and clarity in where you want to go. So yeah, thanks for sharing. I think that's really amazing that you took that step to even seek a coach at that age. I think most people will always say, I'm doing fine, I think I can do without one, but I think it's great that you were able to say, hey, let me try it out. I'm not sure what's going to offer, but yeah, I'm going to take that step.
Yeah, I think you also want a mix of coaches and mentors, right? So when I have my coaching and mentoring relationships with people now as a mentor, I always ask, do you want a coaching conversation, or do you want me to tell you what I think? Given everything I've seen, that your other mentors would have seen other things, right? So here's a helpful example, right, of like using and leveraging your mentors and having that, having a good dynamic with them. So when I was applying to McKinsey, I was 22. I reached out to a mentor that I had, only nurtured that year, that 1 year I was in Geneva, Switzerland. And she said, okay, honey, let me get your CV in front of a partner at McKinsey in Zurich and get his feedback. And she came back and said, I'm so sorry. He said, it's going to be really tough to land a role if you don't also speak German. I only spoke French at the time, and you don't have a business degree. I called someone else, right? I knew there was this other guy who was going to make 2,000 euros if I got in, and he coached me on how to do the interview, and we got the role. And my mentor was like, I'm so proud of you because I went and got this information for you, and you still hustled, you still gunned it, right? So you need to find mentors who are going to go out and get information for you, right? That's a different role from a coach. The coach is about your frameworks for thinking about how you make life decisions. What I've leveraged my mentors for and how my mentees leverage me now is information.
Nice. Yeah, I guess we've related to that, like people who inspire you. Who would you say, has been the heroes of your life, or the role models that you look up to, and how has that shaped how you think, how you see life, and how you've brought yourself to today?
Yeah, so I'm big on supporting people who can't see as clearly what a privileged world looks like, right? So a bit of my background as well. When I was 11, I moved to the US from Indonesia. And even though I felt that I came from a lot of privilege in a sense that, I was raised with a strong sense of self-worth and all that, the environment was entirely new. for me, right? Applying for financial aid to go to university. I went to King's on a scholarship from the Rotary Foundation. I think in terms of mentors and that type of community is people who can identify what you don't know and support you on that journey, right? So again, at King's, we had this, does anyone remember the Aim Higher program? It's a mentoring program to help first generation students. And as part of that program, we went to Bethnal Green Technology College and worked with first generation students whose parents didn't want to let them go beyond London to go to university, right? Let alone internationally. So I think the people that I've really looked up to has been that community, right? And my friend Keng Keng is here, a fellow King's alum, and we are both Rotarians. Anyone know the Rotary Club? So again, that funded my scholarship to go to King's. And this is a group of people who, throughout their professional careers, continue to give back in the community with programs like.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think, you know, hearing the people that influence you as well clearly shows as well, you know, how you want to contribute back to society and, you know, women and leadership. I think that's, yeah, really amazing. So I think since, you know, we're the topic of like role models, maybe could you tell your experience as an entrepreneur, what kind of advice you would give for, I guess, people who are interested in the entrepreneur space? Any tips or just your experience?
We could talk all day. Maybe let's
summarize
survey the
2-3 points.
Let's survey the audience real quick. How many are currently entrepreneurs? Raise your hand. How many are looking to become entrepreneurs at some point in your life? Okay, and how many are in venture capital or work with a startup that is backed by venture capital? Okay, how many are with family businesses? Handful, SMEs, small, medium enterprises. Okay, so quite a mix, right? So on entrepreneurship, I think defining success is very important, right? So within the big business school, I'm sure we talk about this, right? There are venture-backed companies whose goal it is to eventually become a vehicle for wealth creation when you become a publicly listed company. There are SMEs and family businesses. And I think, you know, when I was growing up in New York in my 20s, it was said rather condescendingly if you were trying to build a lifestyle business, right? They'd say, oh, if you're going to build a lifestyle business, don't come get venture capital funding. And it's like, that's factually true, but also like lifestyle businesses can be flush cash cows and you can live a comfortable life. So I think really defining that is really important, right? Not everyone wants to work forever. Maybe you build a lifestyle business and you sell it to a private equity firm, or you build a business and you want it to be your cash cow to fund the kind of lifestyle that you want. That first level of definition is super, super important. And you know, going forward, we all know it. People say this all the time. No one seeks out to be an entrepreneur to get rich. Like it's a painful process. It's a 24-hour job. So I think also knowing what that's like and what that means, and also certain moments in your life being like, I'm kind of done having an entrepreneurial moment right now. I'd like to contribute in a different way, in a different capacity. Those flows in life are really important to listen to.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I think I've also spoken to some entrepreneurs recently, and they're so down to earth in the sense that, yeah, you're right. They're not just here to make the money, right? They're here to make a difference, like what King's vision is, right? To make an impact. And I think it's amazing, like, you know, these entrepreneurs that I've met, they can spot something that is missing and what can I do to kind of help solve that. And sometimes it's your own problem that you're trying to solve, but it ends up helping the whole world as well. So I think that's really amazing. Yeah, thanks for sharing about that. So yeah, I think, you know, we've talked a bit about entrepreneurship, about your experience, your journey. Maybe let's touch on a little bit on the sustainability bit. Yeah, what are your thoughts around that?
Well, we had lunch with Professor Baksh today on sustainability, and you know, when we were finished with the conversation, I asked Professor Baksh, so what do you think we're optimistic about? It's a great question. Again, super challenging, right? So on sustainability, let's talk about from where I've seen it, right? When I was running my own company, it was a luxury ethical fashion brand. And we talked about the tension between the E, the S, and the G all the time, right? Environment, social, and governance. And I remember going to Europe, shoving myself through the doors of suppliers who supplied for LVMH Group, Kering, who was actually really difficult to give them your money. They won't sell it to you. They sell to the luxury brands and they have some level of sort of gentleman's contract exclusivity, right? And I'd ask about the fabrics, okay? Is it biodegradable, natural fabrics, wool, silk, as opposed to polyester? Then you go to your factories and then you're asking, do you pay living wages? And do you have solar panels? And do you recycle the water? It's actually the dyeing process. But there are all these considerations that are quite complicated because you can have a natural fabric like a wool or a silk, but then you've got to dry clean it. And dry cleaning has an environmental impact, right? You're gonna pick a factory that is solar powered, but yeah, some of their clients use polyester. Like no one is clean, right? So I think one of the biggest challenges of our time is building decision makers, right? And problem solvers and people coming together. We talked about this at our lunch, people coming together across industries between regulators and entrepreneurs to figure out what is actually viable in terms of solutions. Now that I'm on the other side in terms of venture capital, again, I think it's about building decision makers, right? Because yes, we have a lot of impact things, right? We've invested in alternative protein companies. But I think one of the biggest challenges, one of the biggest impacts is people, right? When you're building a venture-backed company, you're growing at an insane rapid speed. And we talked about this. There's gonna be moments in time where you have to do layoffs. How many bad layoffs have we seen on Facebook and Instagram now, right? Like this CEO did this terrible layoff. There are hard decisions to be made. And we talked about mental health, right? I think that's one of our themes for this evening and this year. A lot of impact is made in how you lead people. So I think in terms of institutions and where we're growing now, it's less the content and more the how.
Yeah, I think sustainability, I think it's always kind of also been on kind of like the second in command, or people don't really, focus on it. Like, do you see, in Singapore and Asia, is that growing? Because I think from my experience back in the UK and Europe, it's a lot more focused, I guess, in those areas. And I think I read some research as well. China is kind of forefronting that. That was something surprising that I read. How do you think, the space is here in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I think we need to be careful about metrics, right? Because cultural awareness is one thing and regulation and reality is another, right? Again, when I was in New York in 2013, running my ethical fashion brand, that wasn't a term yet. I would go out to networking events, one of which was a King's College event, and say, I'm building an ethical fashion brand, and people would say, what is that? By the time I left New York, everyone knew what it was. It's really hot, right? But if you ask the companies that were building this, even the big guys, the Zara's and the H&Ms, it's challenging to get purchasing behavior to change, right? And then in terms of regulation, you look at it on the other side, and at the end of the day, we talked about this at lunch as well, it needs to be led with regulation. And again, complexity, right? I spoke to someone about plastic use here in Singapore, right? And they'd worked with different bodies, and they said, well, Cynthia, it's complicated. If I don't give you plastic bags, how are you going to throw your trash down the chute? Then it becomes a public health issue, right? So I think I'm a big Singapore fan. I think having a holistic view on how everything needs to work and working towards that is critical, and the role of government is very important.
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about that as well. And I was talking to some people on the role of like leadership or people who have authority. I think it makes a big difference where, sometimes it could be things that we do, we recycle and all that, but it's like more bottom up. But I think top down makes a big difference, and you need to have both to kind of complement each other and to really make changes. And sometimes that would take time. I think that's something for us to remember as well. Like you said, no one is completely clean, and you can't do it right now, everything 100%. But I think just acknowledging little wins as well, right? And if I can do so much to just make that little difference, acknowledging that as a progress and celebrating those little wins, in the long run, hopefully that would inspire others, and hopefully that would, create that self-sustaining kind of like organic change across the world.
Yeah, and I think it's possible to have big wins too, right? Like I don't think it always has to be gradual. Look how quickly we adapted to wearing a mask every day for 2 years and living off Zoom, right? And now look at us. Nobody's like, there's so few masks here, right? I think rapid change is totally possible. We don't have time for gradual change, I think.
Yeah, no, that's completely true. So I would say, how would you summarize, let's say, like 1 to 2 sentences if you're gonna try and explain, entrepreneurship and sustainability for people who are not really convinced about this? How would you kind of convince them in like 1 to 2 sentences from yourself?
Yeah, I don't think we should be convincing at the individual level, right? Again, it's at the policy level. Like when I lived in Switzerland, I was sorting my organic trash like a maniac, right? Like my roommate would pull it out and say, "You didn't rip off the paper from this glass jar from the pasta sauce. You need to split the glass and the paper." Right? I'm not doing that now, right? So I think it's not individually led. I think for scale change.
Yeah, that's really impactful. Yeah, thanks so much. I don't know whether anyone else from the audience wants to hear anything, a specific theme that you want to hear.
Yeah, let's open it up. Let's
does anyone have anything you want to touch on?
And questions for Alicia too, our star Gen Z alum.
I think Kate has a microphone, so yeah, I think if you raise your hands, and I think, yeah, Kate will be able to come with a microphone.
Yeah, to support Cynthia, I must ask a question. Cynthia, thanks for sharing, all your journey and so on. My question for you is, among all the challenges that you face, when you were young, starting the road and all that, what would be the biggest challenge among all?
What would be the biggest challenge?
Yeah, and how would you, if something that you would actually turn back the clock, do it otherwise?
To get overly deep here, I think it's reconciling that I'm at once very privileged and very not privileged, right? That's a huge topic, I think, especially in a space like this where we all attended a top 25 world university, right? And not everyone comes from a place where you know what asset management is, right? Like now that I'm in venture capital and in this space where it's a space where people deploy large amounts of money, which then moves the world, I realized how little I knew growing up and what a hard-earned spot this was for me. But I also recognize that growing up, I was very privileged because we talked about this, like growing up with a sense of self-worth and a sense of agency, right? Like the way you reached out to get your first job. That I know you're not hiring, but my mentor is an advisor for you guys. I'd like to reach out, right? That's a mindset that I always had, that I can do it and I can figure it out. So I think reconciling that and the way people ask you about yourself, right? I get this all the time. Are you part of the Salim family in Indonesia, right? And it's like, how do you want me to answer that, right? Do you want me to tell you that I'm not privileged and I made it and own bootstraps? Because it's not a great story either, because we do need structural change for equity and justice. Do you want me to tell you that I'm privileged so you feel comfortable with me? That's a deep and challenging narrative for me.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, overly deep, right?
Yes, very deep.
Okay, next one.
I have a much simpler question. So
Lighter,
Cynthia,
perhaps.
you are still in your early 30s. You're already a mother, and you've taken us through your trajectory thus far. It may be an unfair question, but if it is, you can answer with a straight "don't know" or whatever. But how do you see your economic end game, and what's the time horizon you're looking at?
What do you mean economic end game?
Well, I presume you're already very, very comfortable. I'm not quite sure how you answered the question about the Salim family. And so bottom line is, in terms of making your own way in the world, at what point will you say, in terms of just generating cash through your activities, when is enough enough? And do you have a set target, or is it just a case of, let's see what you have fun with?
Oh my gosh, this is such a great question. I mean, this is something that's on all of our minds, right? Let's zoom out a little bit. I went to another university alumni event, and people were talking about the investments their parents made in their UK university educations. They're trying to make the ROI back on that, right? And I think about this all the time when I'm having a salary negotiation, because just because I had a scholarship to go to King's and a scholarship to go to Loyola Marymount University doesn't mean it was free, right? Society paid for that. So when I look at that and I looked at earning, I think about that's $500,000 that society has invested in me that needs to come back out, right? And I think that's very related to the question on impact, right? You can have direct impact jobs, and you can have jobs that are less direct impact, and you think about how to funnel your earnings to charity, right? So I've just joined a Rotary Club this year, right? I could very well be working for an impact investing fund, right? But like, there are different points in time in your life where you're doing different things, and the scaling of whether it's revenue and impact or revenue and life, right? Like, I took a whole year off to be a mom. That's massive revenue loss, right? But it was so important. And so to answer your question, like, do I have a target of like, I need X amount after which I don't need to earn and can retire and just do impact? I don't think so. I think it's a continuous flow. If you want to get really personal, one of the things I always talk about with people is keeping your burn rate low, because that allows you and your partner and your husband to be free and make decisions that are best for you, right? It's quite big, especially here in Singapore. Do you guys know what the 5 C's of Singapore are yet? Do you? Okay. The audience, for Stephen and Professor Kapur, what do we, give me a C. Condo, credit card, car, country club, and there's more. Condo, car, cash. Cash is the last one, right? And keeping up with the Joneses, right? Like, keep looking at like, oh, should I buy this like multi-million-dollar condo? And it's like, no, I'd like to keep my burn rate low so that I have options, right? That's. I hope that's a satisfactory answer. Yeah.
Cynthia, first of all, what an inspiring story your life has been, and it makes us proud to be Kings and that you were once a student. And it seems that in your decade of work life, you've already lived 7 working lives, and I'm sure there's many more to come. My question for you is, what do you think college actually taught you?
That's such a great question. I was thinking about this because I figured you'd ask me.
Right. You're a mind reader.
I did. I do my homework.
That's the true examining.
I do my homework.
Exam question.
Yeah. We talked about the how. We talked about the exposure to people in other faculties and industries. But I want to talk about Kings briefly, because someone asked me, again, biggest value of Kings. Being abroad and being in a cosmopolitan city gives you exposure to people of different nationalities. You'll love this story. I told my dad, I want to study abroad. And he looked at me and said, you are abroad. This is in the US, right? But like, in Los Angeles, where I was, it's largely Americans. And if you're an immigrant to America, you adapt to American culture, which is not quite the case in London. And so, back to what do you think college actually taught you? What do I think being at King's and being in London and having all these international friends taught me? These friends that I kept in touch with for a whole decade, who are now leaders in their industries. I always tell people, you can't fool me now. You can't tell me, oh, don't mind him. He's just Dutch. No, he's just a jerk. I have 10 Dutch friends. They're not like that. This is not acceptable behavior, right? So I think like cultural aptitude, there's different levels, right? One is like, can people work with you? Can you adapt enough that like, okay, I need to be more direct here. Like, oh, I need to be a bit more gentle here. We're in Indonesia. But the next level is like, can you work with me? Now it's like, can I work with you? And if I can't, what do I need to tell the organization about this? So I think, what do you think college actually taught you? Is like about the world. Yeah.
Hi. drawing on that, I guess, my question is, your degree sounds really interesting of a title. I have also a almost random degree title, Religion in the Contemporary World. Knowing that the King's now has new departments in the business school, hindsight, wonderful thing, would you choose to do this degree title or perhaps sway in a new area and take advantage of the business school as a degree?
Oh my gosh, I feel like I have to tell Stephen Bach I'd take a business degree, right? I mean, you know, I think we talked about this, right? It's a new school, it's only 5 years old, but it's with a 100-plus-year-old institution, right? So I think that would be a more targeted play, right? To go to the business school, they will network you through the city and through the world and set up internships in Singapore and all of that. So I think that would be more targeted. This program was for the most open-minded, loosey-goosey humans on the planet. It was 10 of us, and we are all beautifully weird, right? It was people who were like, it's philosophy, it's economics, it's politics. It's sat in the School of Law, I think, because we didn't know where to put it. So I think it's risk tolerance, right? This is a super high-risk degree because there's no path, and when you're looking at employers, when people receive your CV, they can't even get through the line, right? So this was a choice for me to be there. I wanted to spend that 1 year with those professors and those people, and that was going to contribute to who I am, and I was going to fight for my place in the labor market in different ways.
I already have the mic, thanks. So you both come from an ethics degree. You also worked in the human rights space. You come from the mental health space. But at the same time, you're now in the venture capital that is considered to be somewhat cutthroat, very much focused on your ROI. How can I grow profits? It's not about being human. It is about making money. So how do you reconcile that? And also, where do you see that mental health journey going with the probably economic challenges coming up?
Yeah, I'd love to unpack that more deeply, especially now that I've been on this side. I see more clearly what venture capital is, right? Let's talk about two ends. When the money goes into the venture capital fund and when you're finished with your VC fund and you've had an exit and you're in the public markets. The money that comes in comes from some family offices, some wealthy individuals, but largely the very large check, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds. So if you have some investments in CPF, or if you've gotten a payout from the solidarity budget that Singapore put out because of the pandemic, that money was made by asset managers like us, right? So it's not a game, it's a vehicle for wealth creation. And then on the other side, what you're gunning for is to build the next blue chip publicly listed company, right? That's also a vehicle for wealth creation, right? What happens in between, that's the challenging part, right? So I don't think it's actually the cutthroatness. I actually think is less so about damaging those around you. It's more about the actual chaos of building something so sturdy and structured. So, I don't think I would be able to take a role that was in a conflict of interest with what I do, but I think that lesson more than anything is to entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs, right? Like venture capital firms do not invest in something that you are personally passionate about. And if you don't feel like doing it anymore, maybe you'll stop, or your life circumstances change. Maybe you'll stop, or you're building something that is going to become a public good, right? And if we need to reinstall new leadership because that's what it takes to build the next blue chip company, that's what it will take. So I think that's at the core of it, what we're looking at. We're building public goods.
Yeah, I think that was really insightful. I think that definitely, shows how you kind of manage to reconcile that. Because I think to your question, I think when you think of it on a surface level, it sounds like it's two different spectrums, right? Sustainability and human values, and then suddenly venture capital. So I think, thanks for sharing. I think that was a really insightful space. I think in the mental health space as well, have you seen that, being quite I guess a popular area beyond, I think you said for your venture capital, you invest in a lot of technology and other areas.
Yeah, we have two ed tech companies that focus on leadership, right? And we talked about this at our lunch as well. People actually is the biggest impact, right? I don't think we measure that as much. Like, we measure, is your building LEED certified? Do you have single stream recycling? I've seen all of these B Corp checklists, right? The poor consultants running around going, Cynthia, do you have single stream recycling, right? But I don't think it's very rare that they ask me like, well, how stressed out is your team, right? And what's the turnover rate? They're starting to, but I think that is less touched upon and increasingly becoming touched upon with companies like yours that service employers with mental health solutions. So I think that we're going in the right direction there. We have time for, we're finished? We got time?
Like a short question?
Short question? Okay, last burning question. Professor Stephen Bach.
Hopefully a nice, easy one. What would you have told your younger self, 5 or 10 years ago?
Oh my gosh, super easy. It's gonna be okay. So that's all. So I guess
Short and sweet.
while we wrap, what are some plugs that we need to do for Kings, right? So engagement, fundraising team, what are your 3 T's? Time, talent, and treasure, right? A little bit less aggressive than my American alma mater on the checks. But I think we talked about raising the profile of Kings, right? Like, as more people know about it, as you encourage your peers to send their kids to Kings, that increases the value of our degrees and the wonderful things the university does. So I hope to see you guys at Dual Day and what's next? King's Global Day of Service. So we'll see you guys again soon, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've all had this experience when you go to an event and you see someone speak and you say, this is the day I met a future world leader. And I think, Cynthia, in many ways, hearing you and Alicia and bringing that out so beautifully, quite a memorable interaction this has been. Look, thank you very much to all our King's alumni and their partners and friends who've joined us here today. What a wonderful evening it has been. You heard a little bit through slides about Kings, but nothing makes it come alive as speaking to some of our alumni. So thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance. Now, it doesn't finish here. Now it's time for having some hors d'oeuvres and drinks and mingling. So thank you for your attendance. And Edward, would you want to say anything more to your team? I'm just looking for Edward Young. If he's... No, I think all of that is said. So the party begins now. And thank you to our speakers today. And thank you to all of you for attending. Thank you.